promote and enrich the Kingsport City Archives in providing services and opportunities for the community. So, like most mission statements, I might have seen a yawn or two out there, but a few years ago we adopted the phrase where history lives, and I think that's really a compelling statement of what we're about. We're a repository for items and artifacts and photographs and correspondence that really capture the essence of Kingsport history. We have a dedicated group of members of our board of directors. Most of us are wearing these tags, so if you have questions about what's the Friends of the Archives do, opportunities for your involvement, see one of us with the badge, and we'd be happy to tell you more about what the Friends of the Archives does and how you can get involved. And in fact, we have membership cards available on the table as you leave if you'd like to sign up and become a member and get on our different communications about Friends of Archives activities. We would love to have you join us. And you also can speak to Mark Breeding after the lecture tonight. He can tell you a little bit more about what's involved in membership. We sponsor 2 lectures a year. One is the Gail Hale lecture, which we'll hear more about a little bit later. We also have the Betty Gibson lecture, which is usually in the fall. But in addition to that, I hope many of you are participating in the monthly meetings of the Kingsport Historical Society, which is doing a fantastic job of bringing programs of interest about Kingsport history every month. So stay tuned for that, or you can talk to Ken Marsh, who's a member of our board as well, about that. So a lot of great ways to stay connected to interesting things about Kingsport history. And one thing I want to particularly note tonight is our archivist, Brianne Wright, does a fantastic job of managing the Kingsport Archives, managing the collections, receiving, sorting, storing, and assisting people in finding things that they need in the archives. But in addition to that, Brianne has written 3 books about Kingsport history. One is On This Day in Kingsport History. One is a history of downtown Kingsport. And then the newest one is Kingsport City of Industry, which was just published last year. And these are, I know the City of Industry one is available at Hudson's General Store. I know the other ones are available, I think, on Amazon, right? Yeah, they're available on Amazon. That's where I got my copy of the On This Day in Kingsport History. So thank you, Brianne, for your great work in the archives and bringing that to us. So at this point, I'd like to ask Kathy Kilgore to come forward and explain a little bit about who Gail Hale was and to acknowledge some family members who are with us tonight.
Hello, everybody. Good to see so many people here tonight. And I think it was last year, and I don't know if it was fall, but it was pouring rain. It was just like a huge storm, and everybody got soaked coming in. We didn't have as many people. This lecture series is in memory of Gail Smith Hale. Gail was a native of Kingsport. She was on the Kingsport Archives Board along with several other organizations. Gail had a catering business and then was in real estate for many years. She was married to Thomas Smith of Kingsport, and they had 2 children, Tommy and Wynn. After his passing, she married John Hale, who was also a Kingsport native. We would like to honor her tonight with the lecture series. Her brother and sister-in-law, Andy and Susan Taylor, are here tonight. Stand up. Second row right here. And it was going to be along with sister-in-law Eleanor Ford and my sister Jennifer Hunter, but my father's not doing well and they're home with him. And she is my aunt and my sister Jennifer Hunter, and then her sister-in-law Eleanor Ford. That's my mom. And they were both on the board of the archives too previously. So hope you'll enjoy it. Thank you, Earl.
Thank Okay? And at this point, I would like to, and I'd like to ask Mark Breeding to come up and introduce our speaker.
Good evening. My name is Mark Breeding, and I have the pleasure of serving on the board of the Friends of the Kingsport Archives. And tonight, I'm very excited about this program. The Kingsport Archives would not have the material, would not have all of the information that had not been for our guest tonight. And he has played an integral part in recording Kingsport's history. Our guest tonight is Mr. Robert Earl Carter, better known as Earl Carter. Earl was born and grew up in Kingsport, Tennessee, graduated from Dobbins Leonard High School, and attended ETSU. Earl was also a guest lecturer at journalism classes at ETSU and served as a mentor to the photo staff at Alabama A&M in Huntsville, Alabama. Earl began his photojournalism career at the Kingsport Times-News and also worked at the Miami Herald as a staff photographer, and then the Huntsville, Alabama Times as photo editor. Earl received numerous awards for photography from the Tennessee Press Association, the National Press Photographers Association, and is a former UPI, United Press International Photographer of the Year. Earl served on the Kingsport Boys and Girls Club Board of Directors for 15 years, as well as volunteering and teaching at that facility. He won the Man and Boy Award given by the Boys Club organization. He also has the distinction of being a former Kingsport Volunteer of the Year recipient. Earl has authored several books, the Appalachian Album, which is out front when you all leave tonight. We have a copy of it for you to look at. It's available on Amazon. But he's noted for this Appalachian Album, and he's most notably, he is involved in book design and production. He began the series Postcards from the Past, which uses vintage postcards and photos as historical documents of the local communities. And you've probably seen these, especially around Christmas time. They're a popular item, and they're a big favorite with the Kingsport Archives. It gives me great pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Mr. Earl Carter.
Wow, that sounds like quite a fellow. He's out in the lobby, but you got me. Thank you. I am honored to be here tonight. Thank you for asking me to be your speaker for this. I appreciate it. And I hope you will appreciate it at the time the evening is over. And let me see if I can get to working some of this equipment up here. We'll get started. There we go. I want to start out with something that I did about a year into my career, and then kind of backtrack from there. So we'll start with a little video project here if we can.
Studying about that good old ring, and you shall wear the starry crown. Good Lord, show me the way.
just something I did about a year into my life as a photographer. And let's see if I can backtrack here and get into full screen mode. Okay, there we go. I got my initial inspiration to be a photographer. I guess I got to stay close to this mic, although you probably can hear me in here. When I was in high school, in study hall, with nothing else to do or nothing else I wanted to do, I'd go to the library and read books. And I came across this one book there that had a photograph of this winter scene, farm, blue sky, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I sat there and looked at it. And thought, I'd like to do that. I'd like to be able to capture something like that. And you might ask, well, it wasn't that good because it's kind of out of focus, but this is not it. I just ask you to imagine a beautiful photo, something that beautiful that could inspire you. Because I don't have the photo, can't remember the name of the book. I wish I took the book home with me and kept it, you know, after all those years. But that's what kind of got me started. There I am. That's the best it gets, folks. Grew up in a housing project here in Kingsport, which is no longer there. After that, I made most of my money back then mowing yards, doing odd jobs. Actually, in the life of crime back in that day too, because I would run parlay tickets from Bell's Fruit News down to 5 Points to John Green's place for bookie. And my payment was a RC Cola and a mint pie. So, but anyhow, I had this little dark room I set up with bought a few things. We had a little pantry there in the housing project. So I set up a little dark room in there. It could only work at nighttime, obviously. Started taking pictures of friends around the housing project. Kids that I knew, things that we did. Then I got big time. I got a 2 1/4 of a 2 1/4 camera. I promise you it'll get better when we get through all this housekeeping stuff. Kept taking pictures. Earl Feathers, whom some of you may remember, gave me a job senior year in high school working at the Minute Market. Took me on a trip with him to Atlanta, and on the way we passed these cotton fields, and I was so excited he stopped and waited while I got out and went over and took pictures. And you just got to remember, this is a little kid who had never been, farther than Knoxville for his draft call after that. Never been to Myrtle Beach, never been out. So that was a big, big time trip for me. And Earl Feathers was a great influence on me in those early years. This little lady here, Diane Hartgrove, I was telling somebody, I just saw her for the first time since I took that picture when I was 17 years old. I saw her 3 hours ago. Ran into her again. Took that in front of our apartment under a landslide in the courtyard in the snow. And I asked her, I said, "Do you remember that?" She said, "Yeah, I do remember that." I said, "What do you think I was doing?" She said, "I didn't know, I was just froze. I wasn't going to move." So, well, it wasn't going to hurt you. But then I was involved in the Boys Club quite a bit back then. And Charlie Smutcher, the guy you see there, was the director of the Boys Club. Had an old bathroom there that they had converted into a dark room because Tennessee Eastman, at that time, had donated supplies, paper, and whatnot to the Boys Club, but nobody knew how to use it, and he knew I was interested in it. So he gave me the key to it, said, "Go in there and play around." And about a week after I did that, he came to me and said, "I need some photos printed. Can you do this for me?" And I said, "Well, sure." He was working on a project to build a new boys club at that time. Needed 10 8x10s, so I printed it. It took me, I guess, 2 hours to print those 10 8x10s for him. Come back the next day, because I was at the boys club about every day. So I need 10 more of those. Earl, can you do them? Yeah. By the end of that week, I'd gotten pretty good at printing 10 copies of that picture every day. And he went on to use those to build a new boys club. But on the way home one night, I passed this alley, which is right off of between Sullivan Street and Dale Street. a rainy night, and had my camera with me, as I did most of the time back then, and saw this and stopped, and I thought, found it interesting and took a photograph of it. It was entered in the Boys Club contest, didn't win, got an honorable mention, didn't, was a nice little prize, didn't, I was just flattered that, we got anything. But then one day at school, I got this note from John Molly at the Times News saying, give him a call. Wanted me to come I didn't have a phone. We didn't have a phone. Never had a phone all the way through high school. So we had to call the school to get a hold of me. But we went down, and I don't know if y'all remember, that was downtown. So went down, and I had to audition for the managing editor at that time. It was Bill Roche. He was interested, but he wanted me to audition. He wanted me to go out and take pictures and see if I was worthy of this job he was going to give me. So I did, and we ended up with this photograph here that he made into a page, my first photo page in a newspaper. And the article that went with it was the fact that they were about to give drawings and break ground on a new boys club. He tied it into the boys club project, which I was thankful for. So my influences back then, Life magazine. That was the epitome of photojournalism at that time. All over, if you covering the world, the best in photos, that's where it was, Life magazine. Okay. Now it probably applies to a lot of people, I'm not sure, but I tell you, anybody remember Virginia Poe in the Kingsport Camera Shop? She apparently thought that of me because I wanted to buy, I thought I was big time, I had this full page. I wanted to buy a Nikon F. She refused to sell me a camera. She said, you're not ready, Earl. No, I will not sell you one. This is what I wanted. So she sold me this one, which was still pretty nice. And she said, you come back when you're ready, and you can trade that one in and get you another one. So a few months later, I got sent off for my first big assignment, Hancock County. Well, at that time, it was a big deal to let, I'm a kid, I'm just out of high school. I'm hearing they're handing me this assignment. I guess they thought, it's Hancock County, you know what? Give it to Earl. Nobody else wants to go over there. So I head off with a reporter. It was the 8th poorest county in the United States, according to the federal government at that time. That was 1966. We're driving down the road and we spot this little house here, among other things, and decided, the washing outside. And we stopped and we met this lady here, Wanda Lawson, who lets us in, kind of looking around at the conditions, kind of what you can imagine. But I had grown up into this kind of stuff. This was nothing new to me. This was home. I recognized all this stuff. But, are we not moving? There we go. Had a little baby on the bed, and another child. This became one of my favorite all-time photographs that I ever made. Her, that old dog, that sorrow humped over look. It was just, there's nothing positive about that picture for them. And it burned in my memory. And we'd been there about 10, 15 minutes. And she said, my man will be home soon. Y'all probably ought to leave. And we took that as a warning that we probably ought to go, and we did. Didn't get her name, didn't get any information. The reporter who was with me, he was a skinny little fella, and he was nervous. And he didn't want to be there, so we left. This is the page that we ran later. My favorite picture was not the lead picture, was not even on the page. Of course, I wasn't in charge of layouts at that time. I didn't get to decide what was used or where it went or anything about that. But maybe the editor was right because that thing won a prize. And here I'm fresh out of the gate. I thought, hey, this is easy. All right. So I went hunting what they call my people. I got out of town every chance I could out in the country and ran into a guy named Rand Mendenhall, the circuit riding Methodist preacher over in Scott County, Fairview community of Scott County, Virginia. That's one of his churches back there. So I guess most of you know, a lot of Methodists in here I heard from you guys coming in, so you know what that's all about. They go to a different church every week, and the congregation kind of falls where the local people gather there so that they can maintain all the churches. And he told me about doing this back in the days when he rode a horse to do this. He'd been doing it so long. He said, rode in the winter, it was so cold, his boots would freeze in the stirrup. And I went with him, accompanied him that day. I love these characters that I ran into. Love this style of photograph. I ended up making a lot of photographs like this, apparently. That kind of thing just appealed to me. But that's his wife. And what you saw earlier, the river baptism, this was the page that came out for that. That was over here in the Holston River, Young Carter's Valley. And here again, I waded out into the water, afraid I was going to fall, around my camera, my not correct sex. So, if I had, maybe Miss Poe would sell me that new one I wanted. But anyway, these pages, I don't mean this to sound braggadocious, but they all won awards right off the bat. I'm thinking, wow, this is crazy. I'm liking this. This is pretty cool. So on the strength of this, I'm still a kid by my standards. I was getting all these offers to go work for people all over the country. Got invited to go to New Orleans with my editor to speak at the National Press Photographers Association, which, God, I'd never been in a place like that before in my life. I didn't know what to think about it. So I end up going to the Miami Herald after interviewing at several other papers. I thought, well, this is where I want to be. This is the only photo I have from the Miami Herald because they kept everything, and the photo I took here, they sent me a camera. I was in the West Palm Beach Bureau. Got a notice that the Duke and Duchess of Windsor was going to grant an interview, and they didn't do that very much. It was a big deal. So the photo chief calls me up, the editor, they all call me up, and say, hey, we're going to send you over to do this since it's in your territory, but we're going to send you a camera, because I was using that little Nicorette. We're going to send you a camera preloaded with a roll of color film. You shoot it on this and you ship it back to us. Don't touch it. I thought, okay, I can't mess this up, right? Hopefully. So I go over to West Palm Beach to meet them, and I have a reporter with me who came up from Miami, and she's a British subject. She's talking about how she's going to curtsy, the proper etiquette and all, and this is royalty. You have to just be so. And I thought, what am I going to do? I'm just going to, kind of maybe tilt my head a little and shake his hand, whatnot. And I'm all worried about the decorum, how it's going to be. So we're escorted into this big compound on in Palm Beach, big mansion, kind of horseshoe shaped with a big garden in the middle and whatnot, and we're told to wait in the garden outside. And it's surrounded by like 3 levels and these canvases hanging down, covering all the balconies and whatnot. We're sitting there and we hear this woman cussing like a sailor, the most awful, profane things you've ever heard in your life. Apparently some dog had gotten in her way. And I feared for that dog's safety, the stuff that I heard. And she was coming down the stairway, and we looked at each other in shock. Oh my God, and out come this demure little lady, this lady. And she immediately turned into this demure little proper woman. Oh, how are you? And I thought, that's her? She just did that? And she thinks we don't know? And so then the Duke comes down, Now, he's a tiny little fella. And I watched the miniseries about him. They had him shut, I said, no, he wasn't. He was shorter than me. He was a little guy. So we had the interview. All goes well. And toward, the end, I'm trying to plan out. I've got 12 shots. Trying to plan that out. Can't get very creative with this. And she says, you want to put him on a box? And I said, why? She said, yeah. I said, all the photographers always put him on a box or something to make him look taller. How demeaning. And I said, no, that's okay. We just don't do that, Send it back, and that's my one photo from Miami that I have to show. A lot of others, but that was it. So after that, I did not stay at Miami. We had some family illnesses. I have a mother and a grandfather. That was my family at the time. Both of them got ill at almost the same time. And I kind of felt like I deserted them right off. So I made the decision to leave Miami and come back to Kingsport. So back into my people. And when I did, Bill Rosen at the time, she was coming and said, yes, we want you to please come back to work. You can have your old job back, come back. We'd love to have you. So I'm back in the flow with my people, back in the hills. Because those weren't my people in Miami at all. This is Hilton's, Virginia. Driving along one day, and I passed this little lady. I saw her from the highway, walking down to this little bridge going into her house with her gourd and her bucket, going to dip water. This was her water source for her family. Stopped, asked her if I could started taking pictures. I usually don't ask in the beginning. I usually start, and if they object, I don't want to ruin the mood by saying, hey, can I take your picture? They stop and pose or something. So I usually just go right in and start talking before they have a chance to say anything. And it usually, works out pretty well. But she was a sweet lady. Invited me into her home. It's her granddaughter. But the photo that I ended up making from this and using really did not reflect the true character of her existence. This is what we ended up with. Nice, smiling, classic, iconic kind of photo, but really probably not honest as to what her life was really like. I'm going backwards, aren't I? There we go. So then we got into a period of news. One of the worst things I ever covered was this Piedmont jet crash over in Hendersonville. I was in Johnson City at the time, and they called me and said, go on to Asheville. This jet had crashed into a small plane, and I got there, and nothing was roped off. I was walking among remains of bodies and whatnot that had fallen on the ground, and it just didn't like the news. Then I got sent to Memphis. Martin Luther King had been assassinated. A contingent of Kingsport National Guard had been sent down to keep order. And this was back in a time when the Times just sent people to cover things. It's totally different than it is today. We were, at the time, we were a real newspaper. Not, I don't mean that disparaging on what it is today, because it's a different time. But we covered things. We went where they were. I got sent a lot of places, as did some of the other photographers there too. But it was a very scary time. And I was there mainly to document our National Guard troops and what their role was there. But there was a big rally march going on this morning of these photos, and it was very scary. The cops had these big long batons and yard-long flashlights, and were very threatening. They were afraid. Didn't know what was going to happen. And the only reason you're seeing these pictures right here is because I rescued a contact sheet from the newspaper, because these original negatives were thrown away, discarded in the dumpster. When the Times News moved from downtown to Lingard Drive, they dumped everything in the dumpster, totally. And just only what you had or what you kept is what you were going to end up with. I don't know why they did it. Wish I had known. They also threw away pictures of James Earl Ray, which I had made at Brushy Mountain Prison. Probably the only person in the country that got to see him and go to his cell after he was incarcerated there. Those were thrown away. The 1977 flood, Southwest Virginia, those were given to the TVA without my knowledge. Pictures of Tennessee State Prison, just all kinds of valuable images, not just mine, but other people's too, were thrown away at that time. And I noticed we have Mark Mahoney out here. Mark, were you there at that time? A former Times News photographer.
What year was that?
That would have been 1970 when we moved to Lynn Garden.
No.
You were after that, right?
I came later.
Okay. Mark Mahoney, who just had an exhibit at the Renaissance Center, amazing set of work, fellow photographer from there. But anyway, you at the archives are so important because you have the Times News archives now, the ones you have online that the library sponsors is so invaluable, and all the other artifacts that you guys are keeping. I'm glad somebody appreciates the value of it and is holding on to it. So thank you guys, members of the archives, for being there to do that. This is the march that was downtown. Coretta Scott King, Jesse Jackson back there, Andrew Young. You probably recognize some of these people. And then there was Bloody 11W. We covered that too. I worked mostly nights in the beginning, and I would get out and do some of these feature pages on my own during the daytime. That's the thing about photographers back then. If you had something you wanted to do, you didn't wait for your shift. You went and did it. It's just because of the love of doing it. I remember us talking later, I can't believe they're paying us to do this. It's just the love of doing the work. But some of you here are old enough to remember Bloody 11W. We had nicknames for the places where the wrecks would happen. There was Red Barn, Grindstone Hill, codes so that you could immediately go, and the Highway Patrol used these, so you could immediately go and know where it was. On this morning that this happened, traffic was backed up about 5 miles from Bean Station. And I was trying to get to it. They called me and said, you need to get down there. Well, there's no way I was going to get there. It was raining. A highway patrolman came by and pulled out in the other lane going there, and I just pulled out behind him and followed him for 5 miles on the wrong side of the road. And, thankfully I didn't get a ticket from him. Back to my people around town. This is over on Reedy Creek, and it looks far worse than it is because it's only about 3 foot off the ground. But it made for a nice photo. And I continued to follow up on, known territory, people that I knew, kids I knew, places that I would go back to for photo opportunities. This is a page. All right, the church people know about the unbeliever. All right, let's say, tell them they were going to some point, so, okay. Rebecca Wade Barnett, I ran into her at the food stamp line at the Renaissance Center. She was waiting to get her food stamps with her daughter. Ended up taking her grocery shopping, going home with her. Kind of see what I did this frequently. I pick up old ladies and take them home and grocery shopping. I don't know why, just anyway. But this was my favorite photo of her from that day. Took this one before I ever talked to her. It didn't get used in the paper. I had no say-so at that time over what was going to be used. But there was just something haunting about that I absolutely loved. That's her and her daughter. Then I was out on Reservoir Road one fall morning, looking for autumn photos and whatnot. Saw this big pumpkin on the porch there. Hey, that's pretty cool. I'll stop and do that. And did not know that a little old lady was going to come out. It was her house. Wanted me to take a picture of her holding that pumpkin. I didn't put her up to that, I swear. That was her idea. And I thought, I got to work quick or she's going to drop dead with this pumpkin. But one of my favorite pictures. Then I was going down Carter's Valley Road, ran into this Annie Tate. Just a spry little old lady, just to get it down the road on her way home. Offered to give her a ride. She said, no, I'm almost there. And I just love that something about that silhouette. Can't even see her face, but it just kind of, something about her character comes out to me and her body language and everything about it. James Lewis, I don't know what he was grinning about at the time. I still don't know, but and James Peters, this is my James section here. Saw him over in Scott County, stopped, and later on I offered to give him a ride. And I don't know who in the right mind would do that, but I did. And he was the nicest fellow, and declined my offer because he wasn't going that far. But we stopped and talked a little bit. Took a few photos of him, and again, it's just people I would run into. I would get out, cruise the back roads, whatever, looking, and the Times News was so good that people were there to give me the time and the freedom to go do this without question. As long as I, come back with something most of the time, they let me do it, and it was just incredible. Like I said, I can't believe they were paying me to do this. This was for a story about the Head Start program back in its infancy. We did stories about the classroom, and I said, why don't we follow some of these kids home and see what their condition is, what, the story behind these kids, not just in the classroom. And this is one of them. This little girl was the subject, the one with the back to the wall. That's her siblings, and that was their playground. That was their home. That's what they played in. And it's kind of a portrait I made of her in her bedroom. Harry Walker had, I think, 12 or 13 cats in his home. He lived alone. They were his companions. I took Harry shopping too. By the way, not just the old ladies. I took Harry shopping for cat food and all, and come back, and all the pictures I made of Harry, this one was the one that just kind of touched me. His devotion, his love for that cat, or all his cats. Okay, this one. Opening of Interstate 81, and I was up on a trailer with the governor, and everybody was there, and they were having the ceremonies. And I looked down, and here's this lady holding this dog up on her, and I couldn't jump over that thing quick enough to get to her. We got down, and this is the photograph. And talked to her, and I said, you might, oh no, do you want to, she said, oh, this is fine. My nicest lady, Mrs. Gary Dinsmore. I don't know if she has any relatives here tonight or not. But I went back to the office, and we're not going to print that. There's no way in the world we're going to run that. We'll get sued. I said, no. She said it was fine. She says, okay. So after a day or two of persuasion on finally, we ran from the front page from not printing it to the front page on Sunday, our biggest day. And she called me up, and she loved it. She said, I want to get a copy. I love it. My friends love it. I thought, you just never know. So, anyway, just here again, a little serendipity. Things, you just kind of come your way if you're looking for them. Okay, and here again, I get out and I run around and I find places. Country stores. I absolutely love country stores. This one's Blair's Gap, Smith's Grocery, down to Blair's Gap. I don't know if any of y'all remember that. It's not there anymore. But it was kind of like their home, and it happened to be a store too. They lived beside of it. No, everything done by hand, pencil and paper. Like I said, it's kind of their home too. They just, have to sell stuff out of it. A gathering place for the community. these places have pretty much disappeared around our area now. This was my favorite photo from that take. Okay. All right. This is Randy Wood, played for Linview High School. And out of Daniel Boone, game one. I was way across the gym, kind of up on the balcony, shooting photos when this happened. And I thought, oh, isn't that cool? You know, this has got a fan, you know, she's cheering him on. And I called Randy up and I said, tell me what she said. He said, I wouldn't repeat it. She was not a fan. Okay, I just construed that when we were Randy, you know, a fan. And no. Oddly enough, this one got me a letter from Bob Kelka. Bob Kelka was the photo director at National Geographic magazine back in that time, and wrote me a personal letter because it won a bunch of awards, and it was on the front of their NPPA magazine and all that deal. And wrote me this letter, said, you know, give me a call sometime. You know, we need to talk. And I thought, he wants to hire me for National Geographic. Oh no, he didn't. He didn't. But it made my day to have somebody like that get in touch with me about it. We used to have wrestling out at the Civic Auditorium. I guess we still do. And here I was kind of learning how to use flash, and had somebody holding the flash for me at one side. You know, learning more about my craft, trying to. I'm still pretty young at this point. This one I call Appalachian Gothic, for obvious reasons. Walter and Reba Larkey, they were out working. Now, this is a post photo. I'll have to admit to this one. They were out working in their garden over around Hilton's, Virginia, and I saw Reba and I just fell in love with her. I thought, oh my God, she's just the most adorable human being. That little smile and all, and had to talk Walter into it. I said, I'm going to take a picture of you guys. He said, will you come up here and pose in front of the barn? You know, I said, I have this picture in mind. I said, do you know Grant Wood? And I was going to explain, you know, and he said, I don't think he lives around here.
Yeah.
No, and so I thought, okay, this is just enough of the explanation. Let's just do the photo. And I absolutely loved it. And her, I mean, that little old lady, just, oh, love her. All right, around town, I would just kind of go cruising, horse auction, you know, things I'd run into. This is just faces at the horse auction. And here again, a lot of these photos were winning things with the Press Photographers Association, Tennessee Press Association, things like that. We were very fortunate, but it wasn't just me. The other photographers at the times used back then, Charles Dean, Joan Shapley, Ken Murray. I'm not leaving some out. Mark was a little bit later on. But it was a hotbed of photojournalism at that time. There were about maybe a dozen photo papers in the country. And I'm not talking about New York Times, you know, the big ones, but smaller areas like Kingsport that were doing all this wonderful photojournalism in what I call the golden age of photojournalism, and it really was. And we were one of those papers, one of those top papers in the country at that time. One of my big regrets on this picture is Cruising Road 1968. I put this on the internet back in the early days of the internet, forgot to copyright it, forgot to put my name on it. That has been the most shared photograph I have ever taken in my life. Thousands of places on the internet with it, and I'm happy to share it too. And it's just, you know, it was a different time in Kingsport. Some of you all, yeah, you might be in this photograph somewhere. So. One of my favorite people, June Carter. There is a connection. Absolutely love this woman. She was a hoot, and as Rita Forrester told me, said, June never let the truth get in the way of a good story. But we spent time together over the phone, and you know, taking photographs and swapping stories and asking me about my genealogy. And wish I had taken more, but I didn't want to intrude that much on their privacy. Was at the mall one day, the Fort Henry Mall, and she was there doing a book signing for, I guess, the latest Mama's Cookbook or something. She had several. And I went in, and I was just kind of watching, and she yelled at me, said, "Earl," and said, "John and I need a new picture." Said, "Can you take one for us?" I said, "Sure." She's in the middle of book signing and stuff and everything. I said, "Sure, be glad to, whatever, you know." And she said, "Okay." And I said, "Well, I got to go back to the office, you know, just come by and holler at me or something." Never dreamed I'd ever see her again that day. About 2 hours later, this big tour bus motorhome contraption pulls up in front of the Times News, and it's kind of an open area inside at that time. And walk in, and I'm in the back. I see the bus pull up, and John gets out. He's with her, gets out before her and walks through. And that big Johnny Cash voice, "Where's Earl Carter?" You know, like I want him. You know, just scary. And everybody's looking at, "That's Johnny Cash." That's, you know. And he comes in, June comes in, and she's yakking at everybody and, you know, being silly and talking. And she says, "I want one of them close-up, cozy kind of pictures." I said, "What do you mean, Jen?" She said, I said, "Okay." So we did, and went in, started taking a few pictures, and the flash went off 2, maybe 3 times. It couldn't be any more than that. John said, "Are we through?" I said, "No, John, if you've got my book, you know the story, but for those of you that haven't, I'll finish it here." So I took a couple more. I said, "You know, give me a couple more shots here, make sure I got it." Flash goes off and says, "Are we done?" And very deadpan, you know, like, "I don't want to be here." I said, "John, just give me a minute." And Jen, she's talking and she's going on this whole time. You know, we're kind of back and forth. And the flash goes off again, and he says, "Are we?" And he got we out. She hit him with an elbow in his side. And he took the breath out of it. He never said another word. This kind was a neat puppy the rest of that whole session. Got to meet the Statler brothers, some of my heroes. I am the 5th Statler brother there, in case you can't tell. Other people, Richard Petty over at Bristol, sitting on a bunch of tires. It was back in the day when the news media and the NASCAR drivers kind of intermingled in the pits. You know, you could look up, talk, you know, buddies have a conversation. Different today than it was back then. Iron Eyes Cody. I met him at the Red Clay Cherokee reunion down in Cleveland, Tennessee. And you guys know anything about Iron Eyes Cody? You know his real name? Oscar D. Corky. He's Italian. Honest to God, he's Italian, born in Louisiana from Italian parents. But he is so good at portraying this character, most people think he is a real Indian. And nice, but one of the nicest men you'd ever meet, too. Moose Club, downtown Kingsport on Saturday night, a slow Saturday night. Just, I thought that kind of captured the essence of it. You find a lot of things at the flea market. I'm not sure that's one of them. It's Necessary Children. I ran across them out here in Sullivan County. A whole bunch just playing and just having them a big time. And you can look at them and kind of tell the personalities by the expressions on their faces. They contacted me a couple of years ago and sent me a group picture of it, and I wish I'd have brought that tonight to show you too. I should have done that. All grown up now, but they remembered that day. Okay, Mr. Joe Smitty, are you out there somewhere? I took this picture at a festival over in Scott County, and Joe's never seen it, to my knowledge. I thought that was such a touching moment of a father and son. I just had to include that. Just something about, I mean, I know they're close anyway, musically, and as father and son too. But just something about that touched me, and I hope you like it too. Since
Wonderful, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, this one. Sometimes you wonder what effect a photograph you take is going to have on people. This one, I had a lady came to me and said, "I love that picture." Said, "You won't realize what that picture did." I said, "What?" She said, "Well, my son has been living and working in Memphis, Tennessee, and he gets the paper." He said, "I've been wanting him to come back home, back to Kingsport, and I miss him." She said, "He saw your picture in the paper, and he got homesick and loved it so much that he's going to move back, and I am so thankful, and I thank you for it." Dr. Rogers, are you out there? Is he still here? Is that you? Yeah. Anyway. But, like I said, you never know. This fellow had worked for Mason Dixon most of his adult life. They were selling off the trucks, getting rid of the company, all the assets, and he just one last stroll to look at him and kind of reminisce. Weather can change quickly. This is from Annapolis Naval Academy. Like I said, the times you sent me a lot of places back in that day. We had the local cadets, and they sent me up there to cover that. Stayed there for about a week. It was a fascinating place. My favorite picture from that time. Did some work for King University too. This is girls soccer after a match, and just something about the joy and the camaraderie and closeness on their faces that touched me about that one. Charlie Crawford, down in Rogersville. It was 4th of July, and he couldn't have been dressed any better. Had all the red, white, and blue in that. And I did I had a little studio here in Kingsport too for a while. After I come back from Alabama, did a lot of different things. And let's see. This is created obviously in the studio, but Sarah Baumgartner from Kingsport, a dancer, and we just kind of got to playing around one night, and I got the idea for this, and she was absolutely incredible. Things that she could do to facilitate making this photograph. The digital age came along, and I loved it. I just back having 36 shots, and having to time what you were doing so that you didn't miss anything while you were changing rolls of film. I love the digital age. I wish I'd had that all through my career. Another one from that little studio. Something about this little girl named Taylor. I don't know. She just captivates me. Something about that look, that red hair. And sometimes you do things just for fun, or I did, just for fun. But this was later, after the Times News days. But met a fellow, became a friend of mine. Walked into a presentation I was doing, and became a friend of mine. And we got one day. I think beer was involved, maybe before this. And we decided we were going to play around and do some photographs and just kind of see how many combinations we could come up with. This man right here is Jim Saggers, sitting here in the front row right now, as a matter of fact. And we just went out one day, and he got all dressed up, tried different things. We went down on Broad Street. He was in his suit, carrying a briefcase, doing this. And I'm out there taking this picture, and people are leaning up at the windows and everybody's gathering. And I'm like, who is this? He must be somebody, right? He's getting his picture made, and he looks like this. And some guy came out and said, "I just want to shake your hand." Just want to shake your hand. I mean, who do you think he was? know, but, yeah. So, Jim, very versatile. I don't know if you like that one, but.
That's me right there.
And guys with different hats, chimney sweeps. Met these guys, they were working around Kingsport and thought, hey, they'd make a good little feature page. And having that feature page was great. You know, not many papers, as a normal course of how they run their business, have a feature page like that. We had it every Sunday, 52 times a year for years and years, so the pressure was on to do something. And we photographers shared that page, you know, as much as we could. If I had something, I got it. If somebody else had something better, they got it. You know, you kind of divvied it out, gave everybody a chance to be creative. It was great outlet for photographers. And this photograph I shot from about a quarter-mile away because it was the only place I could get high enough to get them, and hoping they'd be in just the right spot when I took it. We still have chimney sweeps around. I don't know.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
The tools of the trade. All right, the next one is, the pictures may not be that fantastic or anything, but one of the most inspiring people I ever photographed in my career is this young man right here. I met him at the Boys Club when I guess he's maybe 9, maybe 10 years old here. Little athlete playing baseball. I don't know if you've guessed yet who he is. This is Blake Leeper, the Blade Runner kid. He was born birth defects, and they had to remove what was left of his legs. But this kid did not let that stop him. He played everything. He was rough and tumble. He was right there, earned the respect of all these other kids because he didn't make any excuses for anything he did. That's he and his father, Billy. Just such an inspiration. Wagon trains were a big thing back in that day too. This one was out in Washington County, coming into Gray, and I went with them for a couple of days that week. Was lucky to have the time allotted to me to be able to do that. And they would travel, 6-7 hours a day. They would camp overnight, go across the county, with the ending spot where they were going to end up and have a big shindig, a cookout, and music. And I guess we still have a few of those around. Remember, this is the days of Tri-X, grainy black and white, no color. It was just, the film quality was not, what you get today. So. Santa train, in here every year. I would occasionally try to make a different photo of the Santa train. This is coming out Carter's Valley from on top of a hill, heading north. Climbed up there and waited a couple hours for it to come through. And then for this one, I climbed one of those telephone poles on this side of the bridge down there at Holston River and waited for the Santa train to come across. Ironically, this is the first 4-color photograph ever printed in the Kingsport Times News. It wasn't even 4-color. I thought this strange first photo to be doing that didn't show the full use of color, but that's it. Remember taking that one, did the first digital photo we ever ran. Just lucky to be there at that moment and that evening, for a nice little scene. A big part of getting out of Kingsport and going over into Southwest Virginia and whatnot was the coal industry. Coal miners, I was kind of in and out of that culture over the years. When I got the opportunity, I was fortunate to get to go into several coal mines. Kind of scary thought at times too, but it was very interesting. This is Bonnie Blue in St. Charles. Welsh, there's not a lot of room in some of these coal camps and places. They have to build wherever they can on the side of the mountain because, the railroad got priority. The highway got second priority. There was always a creek. You weren't going to move the creek. So the miners could build what was left. You could put a house there if you had enough room. This is Dante, Virginia, D-A-N-T-E. Sounds like Big Dante, but they pronounce it Dante. This is a coal slag heap. Waste material from the coal mine is, gradually getting closer and closer to their homes. And like I said, you build wherever you can. I can't imagine waking up in the middle of the night, train coming by that close. And sometimes these guys couldn't stand up all day. Low seam coal, you have to bend over and you're on your knees all day. And those wooden blocks up there are roof bolts to hold up, to keep the rocks from falling on them, hopefully. Just mountains, so much coal over there. And the culture wasn't always the same for everybody over there either. Just like in the real world, it was segregated back in the day. There was white coal camps and there was black coal camps. This is Stone Eagle, Virginia. This is one of the very last of the black coal camps before it went away. That was their church, their school. This is where kids would play, the railroad track. They didn't have a playground, didn't have much else there. This is the white miners came. I'm not trying to make a political statement. This is just the way it was back then. This was the area for the lowly workers, not the supervisors, but the common coal miners. This was their area, which was a little better. But here again, you see, there's a creek that's just out of there, railroad track, road, houses. That's it, throughout coal country. That's the way it works. I looked up some of these kids later on and found out what happened to them. In my first book, I have an epilogue in there and found out that most of them turned out pretty good, surprisingly. They, integration came along, they got moved to Appalachia to go to school there. Most of them turned out pretty good. I had a Polaroid camera with me and I'd taken some pictures and was giving them photographs of themselves. Remember going away, seeing that little kid watching me. Never found out about this particular one. I don't know what happened to him. That's what it looks like today. There's no trace that it ever existed. And about every 4 years in coal country, you were going to have a strike. That was just normal. That was just the way of it. The union contracts would be up. And of course, we'd covered the strikes. It was not a fun thing to do because you were caught in between the miners, the coal company, the highway patrol people. I was on the wrong side of the news media crowd on that one, wasn't I? This guy, he was from Eastern Virginia. He told me that in the mornings when they were due to come to work, you know, the striking miners would get there before them. And the night before, they would collect every old mean rattlesnake and copperhead they could find, bring them in a cardboard box, and they knew where the highway patrol, the troopers, they knew where they were going to park. They would dump those out about a half hour before the troopers got there. In the morning, they had to get out and, you know, kind of look for snakes and watch where they were going and all. Now, they used to sit down and block the road. And the coal company decided we're going to come wet it down so they won't sit down in it. Well, no. This one fellow, they decided, well, you know, I'm just going to sit in it. You're going to have to get your uniform dirty if you're going to get me out of here. So they had to start hauling them out. And not only at the mine, but all across the county. This is one of the little things you find on the road during the strike. Had to watch out driving up there. You didn't want to drive at night, especially. You did not want me to go down that road. I wasn't. Okay, a few pictures of the Carter fellow. It's kind of close to me. Obviously, the Carter name, and you know, distantly related to them through Maybelle Carter. This was a lot of you have probably been to the Carter fellow, and this was what it looked like before they built the actual building out back. They put logs out back, built a little lean-to thing, and had music on the ground out there. That's Jeanette there on the left-hand side watching one of the early shows. Jeanette, Sarah, and Joe Carter. And we all just sit and listen to music under the moonlight, under the stars. It was kind of a magical time. She loaned me her daddy's guitar. This was A.P. Carter's personal guitar. Couldn't believe she gave it to me. Jeanette and I were pretty close friends. And I asked her about it. You know, she said, yeah, well, honey, just go ahead and take it. Do whatever you want. Bring it back when you're done. That thing will probably end up in the Country Music Hall of Fame or some museum like that. Then, okay, later on, I decided after the newspaper career was over and whatnot, I was going to do a book. Put everything together, the Appalachian series, and do a book. Called it Appalachian Album. That's the cover. Some of you may have it, know about it. And I chose this guy for the cover. I was trying to decide what was going to go on there. I thought the underlying theme of most of these people is their faith that keeps them going. You know, faith in their good on the cover. And by the way, if y'all have questions or anything, I'm up to holler out anytime, whatever. This was a second edition of it, and I did this one so that people throughout the country and throughout the world, that sounds big, but I had people who wanted to order the book, and I couldn't afford to send it to them because the postage was so high to send it to places like Germany and England and Australia. So did this one on Amazon where it's available throughout the world for anybody that wants it and get it that way. Then I got into this little deal here called Postcards from the Past. Bored, looking for something to do. And I enjoy all those old pictures that people post on the internet, on Facebook especially, you know, this and that, way back when. And I love seeing those things, and some of them are in pretty bad shape. And I took a couple out, and I kind of, you know, reconstructed them, made them look a little better back to, you know, the way they were when they were new. Why don't I put these things together in a book? You know, maybe somebody might enjoy seeing all these in a book. So that's what I did. Started out with one on Kingsport, looking for old photos. That was okay, and then said, well, why don't I do Johnson City? And kind of got through with that, and said, well, why don't I do Bristol? and it just kind of got out of hand. But I want to show you some of the ones from the first book from Kingsport. This is First Baptist Church. I don't know if, most of you probably never knew that it looked like this. Maybe some of you did. But that was originally what it looked like. Far cry from the big church that we got up there now, right? Here's kind of a rare one. This is folks coming back from river baptism. This is Reedy Creek where it runs into the Holston River. You can see Bays Mountain in the background. They've been to a baptism over there, and they're heading back into town. Before there was the Scobies, Marvelous Tourist Board. Everybody has to start somewhere. There's a Christmas parade downtown. I thought I cut my mic off. I think I did. City Transportation Company. Did most of you know there was a theater in Lynn Garden at one time? This is where Pals is right now. And of course, we all remember the homestead. What a grand place that was, when it was in its heyday. This is Grassdale. This is the old Grossclough place, which is now boarded up over here. Clinchfield and Stone Drive. And Kingsport's first library, if I'm not mistaken, was in this building when it was YMCA, city offices, and everything else. But actually, I was in that library at one time, checking out a book on how to speak Italian. I don't know, I had no explanation for why. Okay, this is kind of looks like this now, doesn't it? This is a really old photo taken by George Massa for Asheville Postcard Company. And Ken Manus, are you still out there, or does he have to leave? Is that your house?
It is. The one on the left.
Isn't that amazing that it hadn't changed that much, and that's been almost 100 years ago?
Yep.
But this guy named George Massa would take pictures. He made a picture like that too in the daytime, but his specialty was taking these pictures and making them look like nighttime scenes. Plane crash on Sullivan Street. This is right down where the Oakwood Market used to be, right in that area there. A fantastic restaurant. There was a little airstrip in Cherokee Village at the time. Tom McNear is one of the early photographers, Kingsport guys, responsible for a lot of the old photographs taken around Kingsport. Another guy named Walter Klein out of Chattanooga who came up here and did a lot. This guy here is probably responsible for more old photos and postcards than anybody in the world. A guy named George Massa come over from Japan, got a job at the Grove Park Inn, and got to be familiar with the people who were, fairly wealthy folks there. His hobby was photography, and he got to taking pictures of the influential people who come in, and somebody backed him. You could just go out and take scenes to promote the area. And he was instrumental in establishing the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and the Blue Ridge Parkway through his photos. Like I said, Johnson City and Bristol got into those too. And it kind of got out of hand. I had about 4 or 5 more in the works. But these are the ones that are available now. It's not a commercial, but these are all available on Amazon.com for what it's worth. And another one I'm working on. Somebody came in here, Mr. Hood came in here today with a book he's working on, DB, and we were talking about, he had a copy of the first one of this. It's been 50 years since I did this book on Buck and his team, 1975. And I'm redoing it with an update on what happened to the boys, some new pictures of Buck. Oh, that'll be out a little bit later this year, a few months. Remember the little girl that I thought should have used the big picture, her, the dog, and the stove, and this one? It always troubled me what happened to her. After all those years, she was on my mind. I couldn't quit thinking about her, and I decided about 12 years after I took this picture, I was going to find out what happened to her. So I took an old picture of her mama, and I started going to country stores in Hancock County, Hawkins County, asking store clerks who she might be, and one of them recognized her and directed me down here. This is where they live, no longer there. But this is where they were then. They were living on the side of Clinch Mountain, near Treadway, Tennessee. And I went back and looked them up, found them. That's the little girl. Now she's a teenager. At first, I didn't know which one it was. There was two little girls, and I picked the wrong one. And her mom had it wrong, and we ran a picture page actually identifying the wrong girl, and got to thinking about it after I got back. So that can't be her. She had a sister, and the little girl that was on the bed did not make it. She died. She passed away. So it was kind of confusing. This is her mom now, and one of her brothers. That is her father. That's the man we were scared of was going to come home. It's my man to be home soon. And actually turned out to be a really nice man whose name happens to be Earl Lawson. There's the whole clan the next time I saw them. That's me and the two of them. This is the first time I'd seen them after all those years. She was a little scared to get out of her mama's arms around me at first. They kind of got to know me and accepted me as part of their family after a while. But I went back several times, visit them. I wish I'd gone back many more times than what I did. So they just lived a simple life. He was a sharecropper, did odd jobs, raised tobacco. Coming home with a pan full of honey. I went home that day with a jar full of honey too. It was very, very nice. Every time we went, they wanted to get together to swell and sit down and take a family picture. So we did that every time I went there. And this picture, this was on another trip back down there. I always take a picture, and I want you to notice the next picture that's coming up. I said, they accepted me as part of their family. This picture, this is the twins, Billy and Richard. Look at that photograph on the table up there. I saw that and I thought, oh my God, that's so sweet. I'm family. And I still feel that way about them. The girls dressed up. And here's the last time we had all of them together, most of them. One had died, Earl Lawson had passed away at this time. Bonnie had got cancer. That's the reason she looks the way she does. She had developed cancer and was very sick. There she is, younger. You can see what it did to her along the years the cancer did. She actually passed away about 6 months after I made this photo here. One of the last times I saw her. Right there. And this is one of my favorite pictures, kind of the ending of the saga of the lost, heading home. One of the young kids heading home. But it was satisfying to go back and find them. I wish that I had taken more pictures of everybody, but like I said, 36 shots in a new roll, and you didn't have unlimited shots like you do today. Or it would have been different, what it would have done. I had something
Not sure I want to show you guys. Let's see if I can get out of this. Yeah. Sorry, I'm on somebody else's computer and it's strange to me. That's, you know, looking back on what I've done, it's been a joy, it's been a pleasure. Just, I've had the time of my life. I wouldn't have wanted to have done anything else. And again, I can't believe they paid me to do that. It's just amazing to be able to do, you know, do something for fun and get paid for it. And the satisfaction of the people that I've worked with. I mean, they're characters, newspaper people, they're characters. They all are, but they're great people. You know, you learn so much from each one of them. I've had the time of my life doing that. I'd like, one other thing I'd like to show you, kind of, you know, at the end of my photographic journey, my odyssey, to kind of look back on some of these people that I've had the privilege of knowing.